Hey everybody, welcome to the Ironworks podcast. I'm Pastor Tyler.
And I'm Zach.
And this is the third time we've tried to start this podcast.
At least.
Sorry everybody. But anyway, I want to remind you before we get back into our series on the Sermon on the Mount about ironworks.media. Calvary Chapel Trussville is trying to build the premier Christian resource network for Calvary Chapel. We have books, podcasts, videos, conferences, and more, most of which are available for free if you go to the website, ironworks.media. You can also download our two free ebooks if you join our mailing list to let you know about some new things that are coming up. We got some exciting stuff coming up this fall. We also have some books available there for purchase, and that includes the new one, The Desolation of Israel, which we released very recently and we discussed in the last few podcasts. It's all kind of coming together, isn't it, Zach? This idea that we've had.
Yes, it was actually really fun doing the book launch and the conference launch sort of in tandem because we ended up talking about the same topics quite a bit. I think that they each helped each other, and I kind of see that book launch as an ongoing, continuing thing. We're really learning how to do all this stuff sort of live, so I'm very excited to see how that book goes and if it's a blessing for people. We've been having more people purchase it at the church. We've been sending copies off to people. Been hearing about people back in Lynchburg that are excited about it. So I personally think that book is when we talked about it, but it's just super timely, and it's going to be really helpful for people for a long time. Tyler, we have got to get this ship on the rails. That's not what ships don't have rails. We got to.
What are you talking about?
We've got to focus this here because we've been having trouble getting this started.
This podcast
yes,
episode,
this podcast
you mean?
Specifically, yes. So
man, you're like a hummingbird, man.
Now
Attention of a goldfish.
No. What you were just saying, this is the 8th day syndrome we've been experiencing.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah, I've identified a phenomenon where it seems every 7th to 9th day, I will have a day where all the energy is just sapped out of you, and that's a day where you get the things that need to be done, and then go home because there's nothing else that's going to be accomplished. And I guess today kind of feels like that. Maybe it's because I went to a dentist appointment this morning, and it turns out it was yesterday. So,
well, is that chicken or the egg? Did that happen because it's the 8th day, or did that happen because?
We'll leave that for the philosophers to sort out. But I just want to throw one more thing out there talking about the book. By the way, guys, we are working on the audio book for The Desolation of Israel, which should be up hopefully within like a month, I would expect. And if you did get the book, I want to remind everybody, please do us a favor and give us an Amazon review. That is the best thing you can do to help support it if you've already got a copy. Just go to Amazon Reviews, give it 5 stars, just comment anything on it, and that's going to be very, very helpful to get it recommended to more people. But I thought we could start today, Zach. Last night we were discussing 1 Kings chapter 18 when we meet Obadiah, who's sort of the quisling, weakling guy that doesn't want to help Elijah. He'd rather just be out looking for grass, and talked about being those that are able to stand up and handle direct confrontation for the name of the Lord and for righteousness' sake. I thought that was pretty well received last night, all things considered. Do you agree with that?
It was helpful to a lot of people. We certainly talked about it in the car on the way home at my house. And quisling also is a fantastic historical word, by the way. That's a good pull from World War II.
Well, gee, thank you.
Look it up.
But I'm going to use that as a jumping off point to get us started here today is I realize I'm actually reading through C.S. Lewis's second book in his space trilogy called Perelandra. A lot of people don't even know that he had another series of fiction books other than Narnia, and this one is called Perelandra, and in it, there's an amazing illustration that I could have used last night that I didn't get a chance to use. So before we get there, let me just ask, Zach, have you read C.S. Lewis's space trilogy, and what do you think about it?
Well, yeah, I'm a huge C.S. Lewis guy. I think I read those books when I was really a lot younger. I think it was like 12 or 13, maybe just ahead of where I could fully kind of get everything that was going on. And then I've reread them and stuff since. I love the space trilogy.
I'm the opposite. I didn't read that until I was grown, and there's a great book that you and I both read, and I recommend to everybody I can, called The Fellowship.
Yes,
which is about it's a history book about C.S. Lewis, J.R.R. Tolkien, and their friends had a writing group called the Inklings that got together, and out of that group came The Lord of the Rings and Narnia and all these other great things. And it recommended the space trilogy in there, obviously, and then I went ahead and read it, and it's pretty good. So, Zach, just kind of sum up what's at least of the first two, because the third is very different, but sum up what the conceit is of the first two books in that trilogy.
Yeah, the third's wild. It's almost like a whole different thing. The first two are sort of like classic science fiction before Star Wars kind of thing, where it's much more like
H.G. Wells kind of stuff.
Yeah, much more like fantasy kind of, and it's all about a guy that travels to Mars, and except on Mars there's all these different creatures and races, and since it's C.S. Lewis, it's all got this spiritual allegorical tone to it, where he's meeting like basically angels and that are over these different.
It's like
worlds.
A world that never fell. That God created.
And then the second one is about a world that's kind of having its Garden of Eden moment, where it's the inhabitants of that world are having to choose: are they going to listen to the Satan kind of character, or are they going to actually choose to do what's right?
Yeah, and that Satan character is very interesting because in both cases you have one man who is a Christian who is sent to these worlds and is just kind of in awe of what's going on. But then there's always this other character, I think it's two in the first book actually, who has come to Mars or to Venus, as the case may be, and he's trying to conquer it and to kind of advance humanity throughout the stars, and represents like a very secular, aggressive scientism. The second one talks an awful lot about like we are God and we are the universe and all that, and represents corruption. So very much timely. And then that gets into the third book where he's back on Earth, and it's pretty much there's a university full of those kinds of people that don't believe in anything. They don't believe in right and wrong. They believe it's their responsibility as the academics to tear down the world and rebuild it. That's not familiar at all, is it, Zach?
No, I don't know.
A group of academics that think they're better than everybody, want to tear down the world and rebuild it.
No idea what you're talking about. The third one, the first two are like you said, classic, like John Carter of Mars kind of, space sword and sorcery kind of books. The third one is like if a Christian wrote 1984 about a university that's opening a portal to hell. It's like a totally different book. All of them very, very good. The what you're talking about, that Satan kind of figure in the second book, that's some of the best Christian writing of an evil person I've ever come. Just completely chilling, and nails kind of that sense that you have whenever you're being tempted or you're struggling with like just the enemy is just bombarding you with something. He just gets that in that book. I don't want to spoil anything.
Yeah, very Screw Tape Letters.
Yeah.
Very
good.
I'd encourage you to read it, but what the illustration is from the second book is Ransom is the main character's name, which a lot of people believe was actually based on J.R.R. Tolkien. Because he has the same profession and everything, and some similar characteristics. But he was sent there to save Paralandra, which is what they call Venus, and save that planet's Eve from being tempted and falling into sin. And he's trying to argue with the devil character the whole way through, until at the end he's like, God, I don't know what to do. And the Lord basically tells him, I didn't send you to fight with him. I sent you to stop him. And so it ends up in this like knockdown, drag out brawl where he's like, "Don't talk to him, fight him." And like, I want you to kill him. And it really is very, I don't know, enlightening is a word I'll use in the book. Like you kind of sit up and go, "Oh yeah." And so it's such a great illustration of what we were saying last night, that you can't just sit back and hope things get better. You got to stand up and plant your feet and take the charge. You got to confront evil as it comes. And I think in the third book, like he's continuing the same theme, but he really brings it home. And he's like, this stuff isn't just something happening on a fantastic planet somewhere. There are people that want to dismantle the world. They don't believe in God. They hate God, and they become tools of the wicked one, and the righteous have to be willing to stand up and oppose them. And so very relevant. I mean, he was all the things, literally, I'm not even being, you seeing that as an illustration. The things he was addressing in the universities at the time have borne fruit into the wild postmodernism that we see today.
Oh, yeah.
And so it was, in that sense, it was prophetic, if I can use such a term.
Lewis was, those guys, the Inklings, were part of what they called the Great War, kind of facetiously, where they fought against a lot of the literature faculty at their schools who were coming in and saying, we're all going to basically the early like deconstruction readings and stuff. And Lewis and his guys, who are much more traditionalist and everything, were like, no, that's not how you study this stuff. And they kind of had like a knockdown, drag out, like,
like over the curriculum, basically.
Yeah,
like, how are we going to teach English to people?
Yeah, exactly. And so that was Lewis's whole deal. And Tyler, what you were talking about last night, really, you said how applicable that is. I mean, like directly, like we were driving home talking about, there's several situations like that our family's connected to right here and now, where we're trying to encourage people that we know yes, I'm glad that you're praying. I'm glad you're asking the Lord to step in, but have you considered that the Lord is answering your prayer by sending you?
Right.
The Lord is sending you
That's
to do
exactly
something, to take an action here, and that's how he's going to answer your prayer. You've been looking around saying, this situation's got to stop. This is so awful. And the Lord's saying, I want you to do something about it. I'm empowering you. Why do you think, maybe this is a digression, but I don't think so. Why do you think it is that we've got this idea that the spiritual decision to make in most cases is the passive one? I think we've talked about this on the podcast before, but it kind of comes up from here. Like, where did we get that idea that the right thing to do is to kind of sit and do nothing? Like that's the spiritual idea. You know what I mean?
Two things. I think, first of all, it's cultural. I think that that's not just a Christian problem. I think that is a Western problem of just kind of be nice, be quiet, get along.
Sure.
Everything's going to be all right. And don't be strong, don't be forceful. Like that, there's an awful lot of that culturally. But as Christians, I think that, there's a lot of passages in the New Testament especially that talk about loving your neighbor, turning the other cheek, do not resist the one who is evil, etc. Endure suffering like a good soldier of Christ, all of which is true. But I think if you are only going to read those New Testament passages without the incredible backlog and foundation of the Old Testament behind it, then I think that you will misinterpret it. And I think that if there is a command in Scripture which can lend itself towards what a culture already believes, they'll have a tendency to maximize those and ignore others. For example, when I go to South Sudan, they believe in loving your neighbor and loving your enemies. They're believers, and yet they have no problem with the idea that you must even take up arms to defend your family and defend your country. So it's interesting to be in a place like that where we're reading the same Bible, and yet there's certain passages that to them, like Joshua, they love Joshua, which is all about conquest, right?
Right.
But they need to be reminded, but we're also supposed to love our enemies, and for us, loving people, and by that we mean avoiding conflict with people, is not our problem. Our problem is that we are often afraid to step up and say something.
Start any conflict at all.
Yeah, so I think that for that reason, I think there's, I could go off on a whole rant about the feminization of the American church. I think that has been well documented and observed by just about everybody. You get, weak men that have led weak churches populated mostly by women, and so the gospel has taken shape accordingly. But any great man, or woman for that matter, of church history has been a strong man. We're called to be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power, the word says, to take your stand in the evil day. So maybe it's just a misunderstanding, really, of what love and compassion actually mean, and allowing ourselves to interpret those things culturally. Or maybe, Zach, spending so much time looking at the didactic passages that talk about love that we never spend any time looking at Jesus' life or Elijah's life or David's life to see these are the men that the Bible said they did it right. How did they live out love?
Right.
How did they live out non-retaliation? How did Paul live out suffering for Christ? Nobody would call these weak people, but I think that we can misunderstand, I think, and I think there's a lot of people that come to the church very much because they are timid and afraid. And I think that we do a bad job sometimes of only comforting them in their fear and not calling them to be courageous, which is what the Bible does.
Well, that's a good point, too, that I think a lot of times we're very tempted to just throw out the abstract command, and we almost resist. The abstract command meaning love your enemies, which is, and you got to understand, when Pastor Tyler and I talk about that, we're not saying that's somehow not true or like, oh, that's just old-fashioned. No, that's biblical, right? We've just spent a whole lot of time talking about the Sermon on the Mount. It's all through there, right?
Right. We're talking about not having a canon within the canon.
Right, and we're talking about how do you apply it, right? Like a lot of times we'll throw out that phrase as if that just means, here, there, I've fixed it now, just love your enemies. But like what you're saying is, how do we apply that? What does that look like in application in our life? And we can and should look to Jesus and the heroes of the faith and the best pastor the best Christian elder and see, oh, in their life, when they apply love your enemies, it doesn't mean never speak loudly. Right. That's an application that's faulty. You are saying just love your enemies and slapping that on there, but what really, and this is something I notice very often in Christian circles, people who tend to be personally more passive or maybe even tend to be personally more manipulative can use those phrases from Scripture and just say, love your enemies, and slap it on there like a Band-Aid. But what they mean by that is, don't raise your voice because it makes me uncomfortable. Or
that's very true.
Don't take a strong stance because I don't like it when you do that. I can't work around that. Don't fight against that person because that makes me feel bad or that hurts their feelings.
It makes me nervous. Like
Right.
There's people that there's a verse in Jeremiah 1. It's translated differently in the ESV, I think, because it's just trying to give the sense, but the literal translation is "do not be afraid of their faces." I think there are a lot of people that are just afraid of people's faces. They're afraid of but then there's going to be mad and it's going to be uncomfortable and I'm going to be scared, and so they leverage all of their powers to avoid that kind of situation.
Right.
And they have lots of verses to back them up, but they do not realize that they have lots of other things that will be condemning them for saying peace when there is no peace, as Isaiah said.
And let's be honest, we're also working against, unfortunately, in church culture, a lot of other people who love to grab these verses about conflict and, I'm just a prophetic person, and use that to basically mean I'm a jerk and I yell at people, and somehow that's okay, right? And so I think when people
I see
react,
less of that these days, though.
That's true.
I think that most Christians that I encounter don't have that problem. And you need to
I'd say on balance.
You shouldn't spend all your time guarding against temptations that don't tempt you. You should be guarding against the ones that actually tempt you.
That's true. Yeah. So anyway, we talk about this stuff a lot, and I've noticed, and you know what else, Tyler? I'm thankful in our church. Let's just talk about our church, not some church out there, right? You reminded us of that last night. Like in our church, I'm thankful to see that this is genuinely how I see people handle situations in our church. Especially the guys in our church. And I notice that the ladies in our church really appreciate this. If there's an issue, I'll see two guys in our church just go figure it out and handle it. I'll just hear of, this happened and then we handled it. And by handled it, that usually means two pretty strong personality guys went and figured it out, talked. Maybe somebody raised their voices. All right, this is how we're going to do it. And they went and handled it. And I love seeing that because that's exactly how those things should be done.
And when you set the pattern of doing that frequently, at a low level, you don't end up with these big knockdown dragouts.
Right.
If you just have the ability to turn to a friend of yours and say, "Don't talk to me like that." "Oh yeah, sorry about that, man."
Right.
Like it's over.
Yeah.
And the moment is quiet, and people,
because the knockdown dragouts come from resentment, which builds up over time of internally. Oh, I hate that they did that, but I could never say anything because that would be wrong. Until gradually you lose control of your ability to bottle all that up, thinking, I've done the right thing by avoiding the conflict, and really it creates more sin of anger and bitterness and stuff down the line.
How about this? If you are the kind of person who either starts to shake and sweat when people start arguing with each other, or if you break into bouts of inappropriate laughter when things get awkward and tense, you might need to work on that. As I said, the books that C.S. Lewis wrote were helpful in that regard, and I don't think many people even realize, Zach, and this might be a fun, maybe less fun, but more informative study to do. All of that, what we call woke now, that all came out of literary study. That all came out of English departments. It was applying a philosophy.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm not exaggerating. It came out of a philosophy of how you read texts.
Yep.
And this is, if there's ever something the devil could concoct to undermine the study of the Bible, I think that's it.
And if you're interested in all that, speaking of Lewis has a book, I think you can get it on Kindle for super cheap, called Selected Literary Essays or something. Because you've got to remember, he was that was his job, was to be an English professor primarily. Right. And he wrote a lot about that and kind of called it very early in the 40s, basically saying, hey, guys, this stuff is wrong and weird. It's not the correct way to do this, and it's going to have consequences. And he was even saying it's going to have consequences in our society if we have to pick apart every text and say it doesn't really mean what it said.
Yeah, reader response theory. All that. It was a move from objective study of language to subjective study of language. And it began as something as simple as, should we focus in an English degree on studying the meaning of words and the history of the language, or should we focus on reading the books and trying to understand them? And here we are. Vodi Bakum wrote a great book on this that'd be very approachable for a lot of you, I think, called Fault Lines, I think it's called, which is about something like race and critical theory, or I don't know. Vodi Bakum, I believe it's called Fault Lines. It's very good, and he traces the history of these ideas, which is an important thing to do. You need to know where these ideas you have are coming from, and if you didn't learn it from Jesus, probably not worth learning.
Absolutely.
Well, let's get into this now. We're going to be getting into Matthew chapter 6, and it's been a bit of break since we were in this last time, but we're going to do 2 more podcasts on Matthew chapter 6, and then we'll do a break and talk about something else for a while, and eventually we will return and get into Matthew chapter 7 and finish off the Sermon on the Mount. And let me just remind everybody, the reason we're talking about the Sermon on the Mount is because if we are disciples of Christ, we need to know what Jesus actually said, study his words, study his commandments, and then do them. We discussed in our last podcast, many people who are on we were discussing last time, the anti-Semitic side, but there's a whole other wing of which that can be one faction that sees Jesus more as a banner, as a symbol, as a name to rally behind, and really has no time for his commandments, and even will disagree with or reject his commandments if it does not serve their purposes. And when you actually open up the book and study what he said, it's really easy to identify who's not really reading what Jesus said. I mean, Zach, you see this a little bit more than I do, and we talk about it a lot. There are a lot of folks out there that claim to be the true Christian and the true followers of Christ, and yet they have no time, it seems, for the words or the commandments of Jesus.
Yeah, well, we've started using a shorthand. I think we've even talked about it with you guys on the podcast, is that we look for people who talk about how much they love Jesus, not people who talk about how important Christ is. Not that there's anything the matter with saying, that is Jesus' title.
It's a subtle difference.
He is the Christ, right? That's fine. But when I notice that people can only use that title, because they're really one step away from the people that'll say the Christ figure or some Jordan Peterson garbage, right? It's this idea that really there's an instrumentality to that. What I mean by that, they are using Jesus as a tool. Jesus is when you say Christ says that we need to be strong and take back the Western culture. Jesus is now just a tool to get what they want.
It indicates a lack of familiarity.
Yeah, there's not you see how that's
there's
not
no
personal
relationship.
Yeah, it's like if I only called Tyler Mr. Warner. Like I don't think he's really my friend. If I'm not close enough to call him Tyler, then you would say, hey, do you really know that guy?
Like if you were to say, what is he use? Well, Warner says in his book.
Right.
It's like, you clearly don't know this person.
Right.
I'm just realizing this. I feel like I've heard this taught before from, I don't want to specify the denomination, but I just feel like I've heard some good old boy preacher say at some point, we don't call him Christ around here because people who call him Christ, they don't really know him. And I remember at the time thinking, what a ignorant thing to say. I remember thinking to myself, like, people say Paul says Christ, and theologians say Christ all the time. But you know what? I think that that good old boy preacher might have been identifying as what we're saying right now is if somebody can't say Jesus, it's not that they're wrong. It signals to me you don't know him like I do. And it's similar to, I've found, here's another little tell that you'll hear, is when people say, I think it was the lead singer of the Red Jumpsuit Apparatus just said this of all things, where he said, when people say, I'm a follower of the teachings of Christ, when they say, I actually follow the teachings of Jesus, I'm a Christian, I actually follow what he said, that level of insistence sounds good. But usually what is under that is, I follow the hippie version of Jesus that the liberals love. It means I don't care much for theology. I don't much care for what the apostles say. I don't care about church tradition. I don't care about even the whole Bible. Just what did Jesus say? And you read Jesus moralistically, like Thomas Jefferson read Jesus, or like others read Jesus, and you end up with a very simplistic religion that, lo and behold, ends up looking just like all the secular moralists of our time.
Red letter Christian is the one that drives me up a wall.
That was a whole actual movement.
Terrible.
The red letter movement was an attempt to discount the other prophets and apostles and say, we have to interpret Jesus just like they interpreted Jesus. Paul and Peter isn't greater than you, which of course is a disastrous thing to say. But it's little things like that. And so what's kind of the character of people like this, Zach, before we get back into it and the text itself? What are some examples of things you've heard of people that fall into this category we just described? And yet I see a lot of times these people, they don't have much time for the specific commandments of Jesus, and even if you bring up some of them, they'll even get angry with you and reject it entirely. Do you have a few examples of that sort of thing?
Yeah, the easy one, not to go back to Lewis, but I guess this is the Lewis episode. He called it Christianity. Remember, Lewis called this stuff a lot. He called it Christianity plus people. by which he meant, and he explained, he said, this is anybody who is really, really interested in Christianity plus some really specific topic. And he said, what happens is once your Christianity is connected to a plus, gradually the plus is the only thing that matters for you. Christianity plus social justice, Christianity plus, Christianity plus the West, right? Nowadays we have Christianity plus white people, Christianity plus black people, Christianity plus anything becomes... what you're doing is you're adulterating, like technically the term where you're mixing something else in and giving it the importance that Jesus ought to have. And what ends up happening is Jesus becomes a pack mule for your thing. Jesus is just carrying around all the stuff that you need and want to have happen, and he's just a nice carrier for that. He serves it up correctly. He gives it the right set dressing, and he makes it sound good and spiritual when I say all these other things that I want to say.
So a lot of these people we're talking about, if they say the West has got to rise again, and Christ is going to lead us there, and we're going to strike down. And you say, didn't Jesus say to love our enemies? How would such a person respond, Zach, if you were to say, didn't Jesus say love your enemies?
They'll say, that it's exactly this kind of loser theology that's gotten us to where we are, and then they usually use some bad words that show me that maybe they don't love Jesus all that much. But
can you imagine being confronted with the words of Jesus and then just saying, get out of here?
The best versions of this is I will see people online where they will just, without actually showing that it's a quote, they will out of context, and it's a little sneaky but funny, they will out of context paste scripture verses in a response to somebody, and the person will immediately say, that's garbage, like where did you get that? And then the person will in the next response put the verse reference, which is always hilarious and tends to cause a funny response. But why do they do that? They're trying to show you don't even know that you're just reacting to the words, and the words fill you with anger because it's you don't actually know the ideas of Scripture and of Jesus enough to even feel them by the sense, right? They don't resonate.
You don't
with
even
your heart.
recognize the words.
Exactly. So you're just spitting back against the words because the words threaten your actual heart idea that you're hanging on to so tightly, which is whatever your favorite thing, your favorite political thing, and you're reacting against anything that threatens your idol. And in this case, Jesus is threatening your idol, or Paul is threatening your idol, and so you're reacting. And we need to be careful of that.
Very similar to how the Jews responded to Jesus in his day. They were desperate for the Messiah to come, but they didn't survive first contact with him because he wasn't what they wanted him to be. And you see this a lot where love your enemies, or with gentleness we're supposed to speak to one another, or self-control, or there's all manner of things that people just don't have any time for, or at the very least, like you just said, they're ignorant of. They were assured by somebody that he had read the Bible, so just follow what I say. And there's an awful lot, as I say, there's awful lot of religious philosophy that masquerades as theology on the internet. It's just philosophy with a religious dressing instead of actually what does this say about God. And I've been warning about this for a while, and I don't claim credit for that. I think it's easy to those that are paying attention, but when I was saying you need to start watching out for those that are wanting to use Jesus in order to manipulate you into a political position, I don't think I've ever seen that more than I'm seeing it right now. And a lot of these people are tipping their hand for what they're actually about. These people, it's about Jesus, it's about the church, and I love pastors, and I love what's going on, and then it turns out Candace Owens has some really nasty ideas that she's wanting to peddle. Or, it turns out that the Tate brothers aren't exactly as religious as we thought they were, surprise, surprise. Or, it turns out that Jordan Peterson has a hard time even admitting that he would call himself a Christian, which just, it's a preposterous thing to consider. And I know I call these people out a lot. Reason for that is because they're popular and they're public, and there's going to be a lot of people that agree with them that would listen to what we say. But all of this is an attempt for us just to get back to what did our Lord say? What does it mean to actually follow Jesus? Because once you can mute the rest of all that trash and just get in and say, what did the Lord say? Like Mary, you choose the better portion, is to sit at his feet and listen to him. Then it, first of all, becomes so wonderful, and the Holy Spirit just testifies to your spirit of how great it is. But also, you just calm down a little bit. You come off of that fight or flight thing that you've been sitting in for the last, I don't know, when was Trump's first term? Like, how long you've been doing that? And you just say, oh, yeah, that's right. This is what it's all about. When Jesus described the kingdom, he said, blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are the meek, blessed are the merciful, blessed are those who make peace. Like, he did not describe the kingdom in a way that anybody would have expected. And so that's what we've got to remember. So today we're going to be doing Matthew 6, starting at verse 16, and the expectation is to get down to verse 24 today. And all of this is in the context of remembering that if you're a disciple of Christ, you got to be a disciple of Christ, friend. And, I would love nothing more than to see any of those people we just named realize that maybe they've just been using the name without actually learning the person, and they don't have a personal relationship with Christ. But you can, because he loves you that much and he wants to see you restored. So we're going to start. This is my own translation here. I tried to translate it as close to the original text as possible. So that sometimes it reads a little clunky, but I think it helps us get a sense for how Jesus said it, and I'm a big fan of getting his turn of phrase here. So Matthew 6, I'm going to do verses 16 through 18 first. It says, "But when you fast," he's coming out of the discussion of prayer now, the Lord's Prayer, don't forget. "But when you fast, be not like the gloomy hypocrites, for they disfigure their faces, so they might appear to men fasting," or to be fasting, right? "Amen, I say to you, they have received their reward. But you, fasting, anoint your head and your face wash, so that you might not appear to men fasting, but your Father in the secret, and your Father who sees in secret shall repay you." Well, this is a great lesson in fasting. I think it also, though, can extend to spiritual disciplines more generally. So much of the Sermon on the Mount is about sincerity. I think if I could summarize the entirety of the Sermon on the Mount, it's that one word, sincerity. It's about actually worshiping God in spirit and in truth, but as Jesus would say. But why don't we just work through this? Zach said, when you fast, I note about that, Zach, that the Lord Jesus expected his church to be fasting. What do you make of that?
Yeah, first of all, it's always convicting because I think it's one of all the spiritual disciplines. Do you think it's fair to say that that's one of the ones that's most neglected nowadays, or just like you can come across people that just they don't even know that that is a spiritual discipline?
Maybe you could think of another one, but it'd have a tough time contending with fasting.
You could say prayer, but we all know we're supposed to pray, and we talk about prayer a good amount. I would say in good churches, we talk about prayer, we talk about reading your Bible, we remind each other to do these things, but it's been a while. We teach on it here at our church, and I've heard great sermons on it, but it's a much more rare thing to hear somebody reminding and exhorting you, hey, you need to be fasting. And yet, it's 100% a part of the spiritual practice of the New Testament and the Old Testament. It was expected. Hey,
historically, the church would fast on Wednesdays and Fridays.
Right,
in the early church,
which is Tyler, that sounds very Catholic. We shouldn't be.
Well, that actually, Zach, is a bit of the problem because first of all, there's lots of passages in the New Testament that doesn't speak exactly in glowing terms about fasting. It speaks of it as people putting themselves into bondage or using it as a way to gain spiritual favor for themselves. So there's plenty of verses in the Bible that would almost seem to be warning you away from fasting, although this passage makes it clear that's not what Jesus is saying. He's more concerned that you have it in its proper place. But also because there was an oppressive spirit in the church for hundreds of years that was, like Paul prophesied, that were forbidding foods that God had created to be enjoyed and imposing fasts and imposing spiritual discipline on people that I think it was probably the Lord's delight to liberate the church from. But we've got to remember that there's something about fasting that is important. So very quickly, Zach, what is the advantage of fasting?
Well, it sharpens your spiritual senses, my experience has been if you set aside time to fast from something and then as you should, right? You don't just fast, right? I think you've told us this before. It's not just not doing something, it's what are you doing instead? So you devote that time to prayer. I just find that I'm much more, this is going to sound weird, but I'm just much more receptive to the voice of the Lord. In that state, I'm able to sense the Lord better. I'm able to hear from the Lord more readily. I have removed some sort of distraction, or even just the fact that I'm hungry or that I'm irritated because I'm not on my phone and I want to be on my phone, or whatever it is that you're fasting from. It accentuates or enables me to hear from the Lord better.
Yeah, it's denial of the flesh to sharpen your spirit, and so that's important. But we've done full podcasts on fasting, but we just wanted to keep that in context here. But I love what he says, be not like the gloomy hypocrites. I would say most hypocrites are fairly gloomy. Would you agree, Zach?
I don't often see hypocrites that are having a great time.
Most people that put on a fake spiritual patina for the church, they're not happy people. And if they are, they're usually like that erratic, manic sort of happy. You know what I mean? There's isn't Jesus wonderful? And they'll turn on you so fast that I think it's gloomy to be a hypocrite. First of all, he's talking about fasting in general, but hypocrisy is gloomy because you're constantly trying to get sympathy from people. You're constantly trying to get favor and admiration from people. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to be gloomy. It's much easier to get people to take you seriously when you're talking about something miserable than when you're talking about something happy. But specifically, what were these hypocrites doing that he told them not to do in regards to fasting, Zach? What is he warning them against?
Well, they're turning it into this whole outward practice, right? Of like, oh, look at me for what I'm doing, and they're doing it in a certain way or practicing it in a certain way, calculated to create this like effect. Namely, I want everybody to look at me. I want everybody to see me. I want everybody to know I'm fasting. How am I going to make sure everybody knows I'm fasting? Well, I'm going to look really sad, and I'm not going to wash, and I'm not going to,
beard's going to be all scraggly, and all this dirt on my face,
dumb stuff, And I remember one time, I said that I haven't been taught this, but my pastor back growing up would teach on this. He said, if you're going to fast, don't you dare walk into like you're going to show up at the prayer breakfast or whatever, and someone's going to say, hey, do you want a donut? He said, don't you dare go, oh no, I'm fasting. He goes, don't do that. He said, just say no, thank you. He said, you don't. There's no reason for you to put on this display of spirituality. And Tyler, why is it that sometimes and again, I'm asking maybe a rhetorical question or a question that I have an answer for too, but why do you think it is that we feel like that's the spiritual attitude, is one of sort of like, I'm just grieved by the whole world, and that's how I'm really spiritual. I don't have any fun, and I'm really sad. Is like
it's all fake. It's all fake. I want you to go. People that act that way, they live for somebody to go, hand on their chest and say, "Oh,
yeah,
oh, that's so beautiful." Like that. That's what those people live for. Which is why Jesus says they have their reward.
Mm-hmm.
In that moment when somebody says, "Wow, good for you, fasting, man,
ding,
wonderful,"
ding, ding.
There you go. That's your reward. And there's people that say, what's the point of praying? What's the point of fasting? What's the point of reading my Bible if nobody's going to know that I did it? It's like when you do a chore around the house and nobody notices that you did it. It's like, somebody's going to find out that I did it.
Yeah.
Gee, isn't that mantelpiece clean over there? I wonder who did that, But what he says there is, I'd rather you fast. That's a good thing to do. Discipline your body, but do it in secret. Make yourself look presentable. And he said, well, no one's going to notice. He goes, that's exactly right. You're not doing it for them. You're doing it for me. You're doing it so that my Father in heaven, who of course is God, will be seen. We'll see that. And we can't serve God just for the things that we think we're going to get out of it socially. I think that's a plague on the church that may be less of a plague in the future as the church loses its social credit. But there are people that church is their opportunity to climb the ladder somehow. It's their opportunity to be seen and to be known. It's their opportunity to be above somebody. Like, there's some people that when they go to church, they're on top for whatever reason. Maybe they've been there longer, whatever, and they will fight tooth and nail to protect their status and their role in the church. And that is a fake, hypocritical kind of religion that has nothing to do with God. And so Jesus is calling us, using fasting as our illustration here, that it's to be sincere. You're supposed to be doing this for Jesus. And if God sees, is that not enough for you? But Zach, that can take some getting used to, doesn't it?
I love how, and this sounds like a silly thing to even bring up, but I love how wise Jesus is. I mean, duh. But like,
they were laughing when he said this.
Yeah, oh yeah.
They would have known exactly what he was talking about.
I always wonder, and I don't love, this is just a personal thing, I'm not a big Jesus movie person. I don't know, they never land with me for whatever reason, but I would love to see someday somebody really get a handle on, because what is happening in this scene? Is a Pharisee going past with his beard all disheveled and like clearly demonstrating he's fasting, and Jesus goes, now boys, really loudly, when you fast, right? Like he's pointing at him or something. I don't know, but Jesus is.
I'll say when I preach, one of the best illustrations you can give, and this is one of the reasons people sometimes tell me, oh, you're so bold, Tyler. And I don't really see myself as a particularly bold preacher as I would define it. But a lot of times what they mean by that is you are willing to call out things that everybody knows about but nobody wants to say. Like on Sunday when I said, what did I say? Something about, homeschoolers or people that want to have like a totally Christian enclave. Like you make a bunch of weird little kids. And everybody had kind of that shocked and embarrassed laughter in the room. because
Everybody
they all
knows.
knew what I meant. Everybody
knows.
knew immediately what I was talking about. And yet, it's not polite maybe to say that out loud. I think Jesus is doing the same kind of thing here.
I think Jesus
He's
did
like,
the
they
same kind
knew
of
who
thing.
they probably had names and elbowing each other and leaning and say, oh yeah, like Benjamin or whoever,
Well,
like
not
that.
only everybody knows, right? And Jesus is just saying, and the second thing that I think is wise about this, he's bringing up something everybody knows. He's also he has instantly given you a rule, not a rule like a legalistic thing, but a self-checking rule to prevent hypocritical legalistic garbage in your life. Why? Because he says, okay, cool. You're doing a spiritual discipline. You're fasting. You're adding something extra to yourself for spiritual things. That's great. You can't talk about it. Now that ruins all the fun of hypocrisy, right? Because the fun of hypocrisy, the fun of legalism is saying, well, I only ever watch G-rated movies. And getting other people to say, oh my goodness, or pushing it on someone else. You should only ever watch G-rated movies. That's all the fun. And when Jesus says, no, you can do whatever you want. You can, in your own home, only watch G-rated movies, but you can't talk to other people about it. You can't make it a big deal. You can't lay it on someone else. He cuts at the part of your flesh which wants other people to see how special you are.
I'll tell you, man.
It's incredible. Like, it's just incredibly wise, and it protects us against what the flesh wants to do.
Yeah, I'll tell you, this is really a sad thing to say, but I'm sitting here thinking about it. Not most of the time, just I've seen this multiple times, enough that it seems to be a pattern, especially with women. The examples I'm thinking of, the mom who is the most rigid in all of the little rules about what it means to be a real Christian, and you can't watch that, and you can't say that, and you can't do that, and you can't go there, and all the joyless, buzz-killy Christian things. It's amazing how many of those people I have seen get involved in some seriously wicked stuff. Like the number of women that are like that I have seen commit adultery, or the number of men I have seen do that who get really involved into some kind of false teaching.
Yeah.
Like there's a hypocrisy under that, and man, it's like they drop Jesus like a bad habit the minute they like. I'm not gonna play that game anymore. It's almost like it's a phase. Like it's a phase. If I want to be better than people, but now what I want instead is I want this over here, and it's totally self-serving.
Well, why would we be surprised by that? Because Paul says all these things have no benefit against the flesh. That all these little rules, all these little things, he said that's not even helping your flesh at all.
It could be that it's an attempt to control other parts of your flesh because you can't control this or that part.
As a recovering legalist, absolutely. Like it's exactly what it is. These rules are and that's why there's the frantic nature of it. Because
you're kind of hysterical almost.
You are. The hope is if I can have enough rules, I can control the flesh inside of me, which I
won't
know.
want drugs anymore if I can.
Exactly.
If I don't ever let my kids do this and
which
that.
I know I'm not controlling. I know that I'm a hypocrite because hypocrites know, right? Like that's where the anger comes from.
Or their children do.
Well, there you go. That's where the anger comes from, right? And I just love that in saying this, Jesus has, and Tyler, do you think it's fair? Do you think it's fair to expand this out of just, I don't think we're spiritualizing it to expand this past like fasting, right? You could apply this to pretty much any spiritual discipline or additional thing that you feel called to do.
Absolutely.
You know,
totally.
Where it's like, okay, so you're great. So you feel, I feel like I'm not knocking individual people here. It's just things I'm thinking of. So you feel like you're I'm going to read the Bible in a year this year. That's great, man. You're a better man than I am. I've never been able to get the whole Bible in 1 year. But I'm going to read the Bible in a year this year. That's fantastic. So don't talk about it. You know, I'm called to abstain from this and that. Oh, good for you. Like, that's awesome. Just hold that to what does Paul say? Drink or don't drink to the Lord. Eat or don't eat before the Lord. Like, every man stands or falls before the Lord. And Tyler,
what he's calling us to do here is he's calling us to do these things unto the Lord. What does that mean? It means I am going to live my life so that God will see and God will reward me. Which means whether or not you are seen doing any of those things is entirely immaterial.
Or rewarded.
Right. Whether you are seen or rewarded or approved or applauded or even rejected, it doesn't matter. There's some people that they see true spirituality as being corrected by wiser Christians than them, and that's how they know that they're serving God, is because the regular church doesn't want me, man. And you know, I've known a few of those too. But I mean, even as we get into the next sections, this is really kind of the theme why I bunched them together this way. Jesus is calling us to a religion that makes no sense if God isn't real.
Right.
That's what Christianity is. We actually believe this stuff. So we get into the next one. Zach, why don't you read this section in my overly literal translation, the GTW translation of Scripture.
Yeah,
here.
the Yoda translation here. It says 6:19-21 says, "Do not treasure up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But treasure up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in or steal. For where treasures is, there is also your heart."
Probably should have been treasures are.
For where treasures is, there also is your heart.
I probably try to do that to draw out the fact that he's, I love seeing how the similar words together, because there's so much wordplay
and the repetition
that you miss.
where it's like dry. It's almost like he's explaining it to a set of teenagers, like maybe are following him around, where he's saying, "Do you guys understand that the heart follows the treasure? If the treasure is here, the heart is there." Like he's repeating it.
The treasure.
Do not seek
the treasure.
He's repeating it, I think, to emphasize with them and to kind of drill it into their heads. The connection between these things.
Yeah, and I wanted to draw out like the verb that he uses there for treasure up is the same. It comes from the same root as the noun for treasures on earth. Don't treasure up treasures, which is a very Semitic way of speaking, by the way. It's called a cognate accusative, and it demonstrates that this Greek was written with a Hebrew accent, shall we say. So it's kind of cool to read that. But again, we talked about this, that Jesus' point is broader here than just money, although that is going to be what he talks about. He's talking about the heart. And are you really considering the fact that you're going to be in heaven one day, and that's when everything is going to be properly regarded? This partly, let's just talk about the principle first here, Zach, just very practically. A Christian is to be unbound by possessions. One of the strongest lines in the Fight Club book and the Fight Club movie, which, as your typical college-age man, had quite an effect on me growing up. I think there's a lot of good to be said in that, although it's not Scripture, obviously. But he says the things you own end up owning you. And there's a whole bit where they're making fun of like how he's filled his house with stuff from the catalog, and who cares, and does that add anything to your soul? You're not your job, you're not how much money you have in the bank, you're not your khakis. And it's like, yeah. Jesus has been on that.
Right.
The church has been on that for a long time, that you're not to be owned by your possessions. It means that you need to be living and building up treasure in heaven ultimately, which is why we can say whether you have money or not is immaterial to whether you're laying up treasure in heaven. But as it's going to say in a little bit here, it can be a hindrance. But Zach, just anything on that about not letting money and possessions run your life? Like that's, before we get to the broader scope of what we're just talking about, that's an important lesson that we all need to remember.
Well, I think, like you've said a lot, it's the correct Christian attitude or approach to those kinds of things, that to material wealth and stuff, is not either loving it, idolizing it, having it become the center of your life, or saying, well, I'm poor, so I'm good, right? It's actually, no, this is not a thing. This does not count to me. This does not reckon or factor in the way I look at the world. And that's actually harder, right? Because it's actually the poverty gospel thing blew through the church a number of years ago, and it turns out you can be remarkably unholy.
Yeah, it turned out it was a bunch of hippies.
Yeah, right. You could be remarkably unholy.
And now they're all, working at big tech companies.
And all you got to do is just, not take care of yourself, not be clean, and not save money. Like that's actually not that difficult, right? So it's not about the poverty; it's about the lack of hold that these things have on you, and that's different from poverty. I've known plenty. Tyler, you and I have come up, through the classic life that you have, where you start out, you're married, you've got nothing, you've got a tiny little apartment, you're figuring things out. And so I think I would not call either of us poor in the global sense of, we've both been to Africa. I'm aware of how blessed we've been, but I've certainly had a time in my life where I had much fewer things than I have now. And
yes,
I thought about money way more back then. So much more. You think about it all the time. Why? Because you're fixated on it. It's like, we've got to do something to get out of it. We've got to figure this out. We got to. This bill is coming. It becomes an obsession, and that's not a spiritual way of handling money. It's a temptation,
totally
a trap. So let me ask you this: how should we as Christians then, if we know that there's these two gullies that we can't run off into, what is Jesus talking about when he says, "Don't treasure up for yourselves treasure"? So how would you practically do that? And still handle these things the way that you should handle them?
Let's make it real clear, real simple. If you are committing a sin to gain money,
right,
then you are making a mistake. You are violating this. I think we often, maybe just because of how I grew up, there wasn't a lot of practical application to be gained from Solomon's warnings in Proverbs, where he says, don't go after a group of men that say, let's have a common purse together, and we'll rob and we'll steal and we'll take the money. It sounds like something that would be said in the Wild West, like don't ride off with, Buffalo Bill. But I mean, that's still a temptation to this day. Like, this is for those that are, I grew up in, suburban white family, so gangs were not a huge temptation for me, but like that's a temptation for a lot of people. Like, I'm not going to be broke, so I'm going to get out there and hustle, and that means sell drugs, that means extort, or that means rob or steal. Like, all of that's very out of bounds, but we shouldn't just assume that everybody knows it's out of bounds, because I've been to prison ministry many times with people that was exactly their thought. I had to do what I had to do, and then the older ones there will say, yeah, I shouldn't have done that. That was a mistake to do that. So that's an obvious one. But it doesn't just have to be like we're going to, put on masks and we're going to knock off a liquor store. Like, it can be, we're going to find ways to cut corners at work, because if we report it this way, then we don't have to pay as much in taxes. Or, if I fudge these numbers on my budget, I'll get a little more money that comes in. But since that money isn't allocated for anything, I can take it, away from myself. I mean, any sort of sinful way. We can go down to selling drugs or selling pornography. Like that thing's been running through the not so much the church, I hope, but certainly through the young women in our country. Like, all I got to do is, go on and sell pictures of my body and I'll make money really fast. You don't want that kind of money. You need to be laying up treasure in heaven, not treasures here on earth. So, that's an obvious one, is don't sin to get ahead. Whatever it looks like, don't do that. When the devil shows up with a deal, don't take it. Because what you want is, again, going back to the sincerity thing, to serve the Lord. So, that's pretty on the nose, I think, Zach, but it's an important thing to remember. We don't sin to get ahead.
I think another big thing that I've noticed growing up is that the men in my life that I respected the most that had money, where they were, godly men, they had some money, they had worked harder, they had set something aside, they invested, or whatever they'd done. The guys that I respected the most that I saw with that, their approach to money was not, like you said, it was not positive or negative. It was neutral. They didn't talk about it a lot. They didn't seem to think about it a lot. It seemed like it was something they just kind of disposed of to get something or to create something, not so much for the sake of it in itself. So they weren't looking at the money as like, oh, we've got to make number go up because, and then you can never answer that, right? Because greed is an endless hole. But instead it was, hey, I need to handle this in my life. I need to take care of this for my family. My church needs this. This person that I know needs that. I want to create something over here. They were always thinking about these goals, these godly goals that they had, because they were godly men. So they had prayed and decided on a goal, a direction, and they moved there. And then the money was just, well, this is a tool that I need to accomplish this.
Yeah, some people can get tied to their tax bracket, man. Like some people, this is a thing that men talk about, ladies. So I'm not, coming down on you. This is the kind of thing fellas talk about, and maybe you need to hear about this, where guys that would want to quit a job, or would want to try something new, or would want to move across the country, or whatever it may be, to take a chance and do something that would be better. But they'll say, like, but I know that if we do that, we're going to have to struggle for a while, and I might lose my wife in that process. And this is a joke that guys tell each other, is that women never go backwards financially, and that you can't do that because she'll never sit still for it. And there are great women. I have a wife that was willing to do that for me. But that's a kind of thing that guys, men especially, struggle with. And they can feel that pressure from their wives. And I'm not just spitting, what's happening today. That's even in the prophets, where I believe it's a prophet Amos that rebukes the women in Israel for pushing their husbands to make more and gather more and accumulate more and give me more jewels and more clothes and more food. He said, until you push your husband to go out and oppress the poor. Jezebel being the classic example of this. Where a family, however the dynamics may be organized, that's just a common way we see it, where you're not going to be broke. You're not going to lose everything, but you might lose some. You might have to get a smaller house. You might have to have one car. You might be able to, not be on the unlimited plan on your cell phone. Might not be able to go on vacation every year. And there are some people, and that, wives are the ones that I'm picking on here. We'll pick on the fellas later, but where it's like, well, we have to go visit my family. We have to. Well, I don't know if we can do that. Well, we need more money, or what are we going to do? I'm going to have to go. And then guys find themselves in financial difficulty, and that's an example of how just a standard middle-class life possessions own you. and your things own you. But you can hear all of the first of all, the selfishness, but also the fear involved in that you're not doing this to build up treasure in heaven. It's that all those things can be stolen. Last night, when my kids had not shut the front door all the way so tightly, and when the storm blew through, the door popped open. You ever have that happen? It freaks you out? We were asleep. Luckily, I've got a big giant dog that just woke up everybody, barking at the door, and I run down and just like a good man did, ran around outside in my underpants, seeing who's out there. And, nothing had happened, but, you go out and you check the locks again. And it just was a reminder, thieves break in and they steal. You've done everything right, and somebody comes in and hits you over the back of the head and takes your wallet. So Jesus is saying you can lose all that, so don't tie yourself to something that you might lose. Anything to add on that, Zach?
I just find that generosity works against this a lot, which is classic. We have a Christian virtue that helps us to build the virtue that we need of being generous, not being tied to these possessions rather than attaching it to this fleshly thing, right? And I don't even mean necessarily, I think people can get extreme in this town. And I don't know, is it just our mentality, culture, that we're very extreme people? Because I'll say generosity and people will say, oh, so I've got to give everything away. That's what I say. No, I'm saying give something. Like, demonstrate to yourself, to your flesh.
Absolutely.
I can take this and give some of it away and it will be okay.
Tithing is like fasting in that regard.
Yeah.
It disciplines your flesh to control your spirit.
Right, guys, when you fast, you don't stop eating and drinking for a month. like you say, hey, I'm going to quit this for a minute, right? Like it's a small sacrifice that teaches your spirit. We will be okay if we suffer a little.
Yeah, sometimes we say no.
Right, and it doesn't, and honestly, I also think this is important to go along with like stewardship. Like, you shouldn't be damaging your family but then saying, oh no, I'm being holy by giving. It's like, well, hang on a second. Like, is that pleasing to the Lord? Right? I don't think that's what we're talking about. We're talking about a little sacrifice that's showing everybody, including your kids, by the way. Your kids are going to grow up seeing, hey, it was more important to mom and dad that we did what was right with our money than that everything was comfortable the way we wanted all the time.
Right. A lot of times people will say, should, things have been kind of tight around the house. Should we, is it sinful to delay our tithing for a couple months? First of all, I really appreciate that question because I love that you're in support of the church. Number two, I'll say if you need to do, have an emergency and take care of things, yes, absolutely. But if that keeps happening, there's another piece that usually comes in. It's like, well, what have you decided in saying we're going to deny our tithing this month or whatever? What are you saying yes to? Are you still getting pizza 2 or 3 times a week? Are you
right.
still going out and getting Starbucks every morning? Are you still? You get what I'm saying? So are you saying, well, there's some people that can't even conceive of not doing the luxuries that they enjoy. Like you talk to them and it's like their eyes just glaze over. It's like, well, I'm not going to stop that. I'm not going to stop Instagram. I'm not going to stop, getting 40-ounce sodas every day. So what else you got?
Right.
It's like that line from The Big Bang Theory. I love it. He goes, nuts to that. What else do you got? But I think you're right, Zach. And I think the bigger picture, if we can come back to this, is it's all about living your life with heaven in mind. Not just that I'm going there someday, but that God is watching me. And that God is the one that's ultimately going to reward me. And that if I live my life well, this is the constant pressure that guys put on themselves. And I picked on the ladies a minute ago, pick on the guys now, where I've got to get more. I've got to climb higher. I've got to, be better than I was before. And that's not all bad, but it can push you to a place where you start neglecting your spiritual life, start neglecting your soul and the souls of your family in order to get more. And you think to yourself, well, if I don't do that, then we might fall into difficulty. And that's not good, but you have to recognize that God is able to reward you in heaven for your faithfulness now better than anything you could get for yourself. But again, that only makes sense if God is real, the Bible is true, and everything that Jesus told us is correct. And if you believe that, then this is how you have to live.
Yeah, if the only thing that you see is, and that's why Christianity simply does not work as a nice moral system. If it's not supernatural, then like you said, nuts to that. What else you got, right? Like,
yes.
if it's only just some nice ideas to make my life good, well, but Christianity only works correctly when you actually believe that supernaturally there is some other place in which all of this will matter, because I'm denying myself now, here, right now, right? And for people that are just like materially motivated only, it's like, get money, bro down. Like that's the only thing that matters, right? Why would anything else matter? If there's not some other, if God doesn't have the authority to tell me differently, and I'm not going to be I'm not going to be rewarded for what I'm doing, then what is the point? And good, well-meaning Christians can say, "Oh, that's not what's important. The rewards aren't important." I disagree. Jesus,
no, that's not right. Look at how much Jesus talked about rewards.
Look what he talks about right here. He says, in order to break us of the bad habit of trying to get rewarded here, he doesn't say, "Just don't get those rewards. They're bad." He says, "Do you really want a reward? Check this out." Like he tempts you with this other reward. He says, "This is worth it. Here, swap me this." It's like with a little kid where they've got some garbage thing and you're trying to give them something good, but they've got to let go of this thing. He's like, let go of that and take this. This is what I want to give you.
I think it's so funny that you have to force kids to eat ice cream the first time.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely.
They're sitting there crying. "No, please. I promise you'll like it." Yep. And then they get in the mouth and they go, and then they open up their mouth real big because they want more.
Right.
That's sort of what it's like with the Lord, man. So again, what the Lord is telling us is that knowing God and serving the Lord comes first every single time, whether that's in business or your budget or whatever. And anything in your life that is stealing your love and stealing your attention from Jesus needs to be, shall we say, disaccumulated. You got to let go until you can start grabbing hold of the Lord. And if you feel like your stuff is suffocating you, get rid of it, man. Just start shedding some stuff. A few years, Marie Kondo, does this spark joy or does this not spark joy? And everyone's like, "Oh, wow, we should get rid of things, be minimalist." And I'm like, fabulous. But Jesus has been on that for a long time, man, that you just don't have so many things. You'll be happier that way. Well, let's get on to the next one, verses 22 and 23. I'll read this. "The lamp of the body is the eye. Therefore, if your eye is sound, your whole body will be illuminated. But if your eye is evil, your whole body will be darkened. Therefore, if the light which is in you is darkness, how great is that darkness?" This is one of those sections that doesn't quite jump off the page in explaining what it means here. It's why context matters, meaning what text is around this text. He's talking about desire. He's talking about treasure. He's talking about, in the next verse, he's going to talk about money, serving God and mammon. So we're talking about this in the context of greed here. He's like, your eye is like the lamp of your body. If your eyes go dark, you go blind, then you can't see anything. But he's using this term spiritually here. He says, are you looking at the things that are light or the things that are darkness? What are you focused on? If you're focusing on the things that are righteous, it's going to be illuminating to your whole soul, and everything is you'll be able to see about how to go through life. Otherwise, if you look at what is evil, it's going to be darkness in your body, and then you're not going to be able to see anything that's going on. So put it like this. Whatever you look at, whatever you desire, whatever you think about, whatever you covet, whatever you lust for, whatever you focus on, is either going to illuminate or darken your soul. So what Jesus is saying here is if you can't manage your attention, never mind just your desire, then you're gonna walk in darkness. So that's really what this verse is about. Your light being darkness, meaning the lamp of your body being your eyes. Jesus is saying, what things have you chosen to focus on, to meditate on, to prioritize, and to lust after? He said, your attention matters. What you focus on matters, and it's not just going to affect that one piece, but it's going to change everything in your whole life. So we're still in the context of money here. We're still in the context of things and possessions, but today maybe we'll go a little broader and just talk about what is the thing that occupies all of your time and attention, because that's going to color everything in your life. It's like putting on a pair of sunglasses. It's like putting a filter on your picture. Like, what's filtering your life? What lens are you viewing everything through? And I mean, Zach, what are some examples maybe of some things that we can be obsessed over? We just talked about money, so let's maybe move on from that one. But what are some evil things that we can be obsessed on that will shade how we look at everything in life?
Oh, I've got some.
What's the first one?
You cannot be content if you're constantly feeding yourself with discontentment porn. And I'll just use that word because I think it's a fair word. I'm
you mean
not being
literally
flippant.
Pornography or
no?
More,
let's take lust. I think everybody knows don't look at pornography, right? I think everybody's aware of that, right? I'm talking about when I say discontentment porn. I mean like I'm trying to apply that to something else. Let's, for example, what is bad news? Is discontentment porn. Bad news is something that gives you this little fire of anger, this righteous vindictive. That's right, those awful people are over there. And when you continue giving yourself that hit of that anger and that bitterness and that fury at things, pretty soon you're not able to see or enjoy anything in your world because you're constantly thinking about the bad thing that's happening out there. And we see this all the time pastorally, Tyler, where you'll get somebody, and you've talked about it before. It's like have you ever had a rescue dog? I think one of your dogs. You got one of your dogs from the pound. We got our dog from the pound.
I wouldn't call it a rescue dog.
No, he was. Well, our dog when he came from the pound, he had been in the pound for a while, and he's him. He's pretty sweet now, but he had been in the pound for a while. And he didn't like. He's
an eager dog.
He is now. He didn't like being at first though. He did not like being like really approached too much. He didn't really like being pet because he was like super skittish. And a lot of times, and he thankfully wasn't aggressive, but sometimes you get a dog like that where their response is, I'm afraid that you're going to hurt me, right? We see people like that in church where they come in and they're constantly just like, I don't know, I'm really worried that false teacher and this thing and they're constantly always just cranked and upset, and it takes them sometimes years to slowly taper off that and realize, hey, I think I've moved out of the threat environment.
Right.
I think everything's
we see this
okay.
a lot. And there's a cycle that people go through. Yep. Like there's a certain kind of person, Jack Hibbs. I'm not calling him out at all. I'm just saying Jack Hibbs is a Calvary Chapel pastor in California.
Great guy.
Who during awesome guy. During the coronavirus pandemic, he took a very bold stand in opening up the churches and really led the way in his state in doing that alongside lots of different pastors. But what then that led to was Jack Hibbs being invited on lots of political podcasts, Fox News, and he's still consulted on these things a lot. And he has a very political audience now. And by that, I mean there are a lot of Christians that look to Jack Hibbs as a sort of pastoral commentator. Is that fair to say, Zach?
Yeah,
so like a pastoral
100%.
Commentator. And so he talks about that certainly way more than I do. He's still a Bible teacher, and he's a really good Bible teacher too, by the way. If you like his politics, go listen to his sermons.
Right.
So what this has led to, because he's Calvary Chapel, a lot of people have found Jack Hibbs, and they say, there's a preacher not afraid to talk about transgenderism or whatever it is. And the reason I think people get feral, shall we say, like you just said, is because if they're spending all their time focusing on discontentment in the news, but there's nobody else around them that seems to be able to acknowledge it, like they go to a church where they say, don't you know what's happening? And people just want to say, don't talk about that, hallelujah, whatever. Then they say, I got to find a church that's willing to address these things. And so they say, he's at Calvary Chapel, let's find a Calvary Chapel. And they show up here, and very often, how'd you find us? Well, we watched Jack Hibbs.
And they want you to play the hits.
Well, yes, sometimes,
like
yeah. That's sort of what they're looking for. And what I've learned to tell them is, I love Jack Hibbs. He's great. So I'll kind of float it out there. He's more known for his political stuff, but we love teaching the Bible just like he does. And I usually try to reassure them that, make no mistake, I'm in agreement with his positions on things. You're not going to get something weird here. But sometimes those folks get a little itchy after a few weeks because I'm not talking about what's ever on the news cycle that week. And sometimes they'll ask me about it, to which I say, if these things come up, we'll address them. And it's really great to see them come down a little bit and say, okay, I can relax because I'm in a place, I trust these people, I trust this pastor. He's addressed the issues when they've come up. He addresses them as they come up in Scripture. I don't need to be constantly fed the stream of bad news going on. I can relax and rest in the good news. And I'll tell you, quite honestly, that is one of the hardest things for me to navigate as a pastor, is how much and to what degree do I engage with the public situation. And I tend to err on the side of not getting involved, but I also know that I speak about these things a lot more than most pastors I know. So that's one example, I guess, is your eyes turn towards constant trouble and drama and even sports. I can't even read sports websites anymore because they're all just gossip pages.
You sound like such old guys. It ain't even about the sports anymore.
Well,
but
dude,
it's so true.
It's not.
It's so true.
I want to see a breakdown of the stats of the game and a few quotes from the coaches. I don't want to hear who did he tweet at yesterday, And I've used this illustration before, but I mean that's certainly one example of how your eye can be clouded with darkness as you just constant rage bait.
And
on
it
the internet,
fills, it fills. What I mean by that is what Jesus is saying. It fills your whole life. As a person who's had seasons where I don't do a good job of this, and
likewise,
I just want to encourage people. Guys, I don't think I've fully understood, because it can make you feel like a weirdo to say things out loud, like your phone is changing how you think, or that social media is breaking your brain. It can make you feel like an oldster or a mom, or you don't want to say those things, right? But let me be the first to tell you guys, I have spent enough time in these places and read enough of the people who design these tools to know attention farming is a real thing. Like, these people are attacking you psychologically. And when they do that, in order to make money, right, the only way that they make money is keeping you at a heightened emotional state.
Right. So everything is the most important thing.
It has
that's
to
ever
be.
happened.
Discontent is what breeds these things. Content people don't constantly pull to refresh to find the next hit. Like it's
you know
a
when I
drug.
least wanted to read the news. I'll give you a recent example. Is when we had just finished and published for the first time the Desolation of Israel book.
Yeah.
I didn't care what was happening in Washington, and there was important stuff happening in Washington.
There was.
But I just didn't care. Like we were traveling, and we were, talking about the book, and we were holding the copies in our hands for the first time and making plans. And when everything was right and going well in my life, I didn't care about this other stuff. I did to the extent that I'm a good citizen and I wanted to pay attention, but I'm like, I can miss a week. I can miss 2.
Yeah, the world's going to keep going.
Yeah, and it's really funny when you get detached and you miss a news cycle and you come back and everyone's like, I'm like, what happened? Well, so-and-so said this and that. And it's like, oh, that doesn't sound like it's that important. But because you weren't in there from the beginning, right?
You wouldn't have noticed, would you? And so I think that point, what you're saying is that contentment, that's what Jesus is saying we should have, that contentment with our lives, that acceptance of what the Lord's placed in front of us, the joy that we're supposed to have in all those things. And when we don't have that, we start looking for something else to kind of fill that. And a lot of times the darkness that we're filling our eyes with it's filling that place. What we talked about with desire, again, coming back to C.S. Lewis, desire is it's not bad to desire, right? It's Buddhist to say, oh, desire is what you have to kill. No, we just need to desire the right things. And a lot of times our good desires, if we're feeding them with weird garbage counterfeits, are what's taking us astray, right? What would an example of that be, Tyler? Like, what's a good desire that you have that you're filling with some other kind of dark thing?
You just said pornography a minute ago. I mean, that it's a good thing for a man to desire a woman and for a woman to desire a man, and yet if we put our attention, we choose to satisfy that not with our husband or our wife or by handing it over to the Lord, and and you pursue another way to gratify that desire, you're going to twist the way that you think about things. And for the fellas, this is of course famously been the internet, pictures and videos and everything. And for the women, it tends to be these smutty novels that come out now, where you're directing all of your attention, you're shaping your appetites by something that can never be satisfied. And get weirder and weirder and weirder to get you to the same place. But I mean, we use the example of rage on the internet. I mean, we use the example of pornography. We use the example of money a second ago. This can be just about anything, anything that you focus on at the exclusion of our Lord. Like, this is telling us that your eyes need to be on Jesus at all times. Your eyes need to be on Christ and what he has to say and what the Bible teaches and how you're serving your friends around you. And this is why when somebody gets really sucked into any sort of interest that is not of the Lord, even if they're a believer, I get worried about them. There's just certain things that tend to happen. Like, the more you get into that subculture, that draws you away from Jesus. And in small doses, it wouldn't be such a good thing. But some of us don't have the ability to take things in small doses. We just don't. Like, if I'm not just going to watch, anime people are the worst at this. Like, when I was growing up, like, oh yeah, that's a cool show, I'll watch that. But there's other people that's like, no, I want all of them all the time, every day. And it sucks away your love for the Lord because there's no more room left. And also because it's a lot of very aberrant stuff in that whole world. And I think children get lured into it, but that's not really what this is about today. The point is turning your eyes to heaven. I mean, that hymn is just so good. I mean, you talk about wisdom put in a pithy way that makes sense. Turn your eyes upon Jesus, look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. He's about putting our eyes on the Lord. And in verse 24, we'll conclude with this verse here today. Again, talking about sincerity, keeping our eyes on heaven and considering the heavenly perspective at all times in the context now about money and desire and lust for things and power. Zach, read us verse 24 of Matthew 6.
It says, no one is able to serve two masters, for either the one he will hate and the other he will love, or one he will cling to and the other he will despise. You cannot serve God and mammon.
Zach, what is mammon?
Well, like money, right? Like just physical, wealth.
Right. There's also there's an expectation. There's an idea, a hypothesis that mammon might have been the name of a false god at this time. I've looked into that a little bit. It's not as obvious as you would think. that there seems to be some evidence of that, but most of the people that hold to that strongly, the verse they use for evidence is this verse here.
Oh.
So maybe, but either way, it can apply to us. He's talking about keeping your loyalty singular, focused on Jesus. No one is able to serve two masters. And I'll start out with this a little positively. I have found that if I let something else start to take up too much space in my life, I don't start resenting the Lord. I start resenting that thing. And that's encouraging for me. Like if I let myself just get too into, I don't know, too into the process of building the church and building up our name, and you know, you drift into that when you think about it a lot. And you start drifting away from the Lord. What happens is I start saying, man, I need to get back into prayer. This thing is just wasting my time, and it's making me miserable, and I don't want that anymore. Or, you know, if you're just even too much leisure time where you're just being lazy, it's like you hit a day, if you're a believer, at least in my case, where you go, I don't want that anymore. I want to go back and go to church. I want to go pray. I want to see the Lord. And that encourages me, because it goes, anytime another master raises his head, I start hating him rather than Jesus. But he certainly comes at it from the other way. Zach, it's miserable to swear loyalty to Jesus and then try to indulge in all sorts of worldly pleasure.
Well, that's the thing, is that all the other masters are bad masters. They don't love you. Those gods don't love you. You know, we think we're stealing thunder from the upcoming passage on Elijah that we'll be teaching pretty soon. But I think I taught that a couple years ago, maybe here, where I talked about, the Lord really struck me with that passage where you get the idea that it's like, oh, these gods don't love them. Like, right. God loves you. God wants to bless you. Read all of, you know, it's not as if God's saying, and I'm going to be really stingy with you and I won't give you any of these blessings. God loves to bless you. He wants to give you all these blessings. And these other gods, they hate you. They don't want to give you anything. You don't get nothing. You have all the desire, all the unmet, you know, urges and all the drive to get things, and you don't get anything. Nothing satisfies. Like, that's how the enemy gets you, right? And I think that's an important thing to remember, because the realization is all of those good desires we have, all those godly needs that he gave us, all those desires that he's built into us, they all get ultimately satisfied in Jesus. That's
right.
Why he's a good master to serve.
And this is what Satan does, is Satan will come along and offer you a temptation,
right.
And, you know, indulging in money, you know, pursuing money to the exclusion of fellowship in church, to the exclusion of fellowship with your wife or your husband, and when you try to serve Jesus and do that, you'll be miserable. It's not going to make you happy. And then the turn that comes in, as Satan comes in and says, Jesus is the problem. That's why you're miserable. If it wasn't for him, you could do this and just not worry about it. You could leave him and never have to worry about feeling guilty about it. Or, you know, you could climb that ladder and push people out of your way, and you'd probably be a millionaire by now if it wasn't for Jesus. But the opposite is true. Sin doesn't satisfy.
Yeah.
Jesus satisfies.
And the hook is, you don't even, and this is not, of course, universal. Lots of evil people get lots of things and external blessings. But the hook that I see for believers especially is the enemy doesn't even give you that thing. You don't get it. You don't get to enjoy the, you know, like what's the tragic one that I've seen several times in my life, Tyler, is like a pastor, for example, who falls and he leaves his family and goes and pursues some old flame or whatever. And I'm not trying to be gross, but you look at that situation later on and you say, did you get what you wanted? Like you're with this woman who was low morals enough to leave her husband or whatever to be with you, to break your family up. You don't look super happy. Doesn't look like you stepped up externally. I'm just saying.
Tony Clark said, "I've never seen a man leave his wife for a prettier woman."
That's so
true. It's always the opposite.
True. It's true. And you see that from the outside, and you realize, look at what the enemy did. He deceived you, and he didn't even pay up. At the end, he never pays off the bet. He never gives you. You don't get to cash your chips in, because he's always trying to steal and kill and destroy. He's got nothing to give you.
There's a reason that the phrase "made a deal with the devil" is an ominous thing,
right?
Because you don't get your end of the bargain. Like he just wants to steal, kill, and destroy. He's the father of lies. So you swear that you'll give me? Oh yeah, sure, whatever.
Right, it's a ripoff.
Why wouldn't he swear to you? He doesn't believe in anything. But, you know, it's like we said earlier, Jesus plus, or shall we say halfway Jesus, is inherently dissatisfying, because you will sense the lack of fulfillment that could be yours, because you taste Jesus a little bit, and then you taste the other thing, which is just slop at this point. And you don't blame, oh man, I used to really like McDonald's until I had my first really nice steak dinner. I hate steak now. They've ruined it. Like, are you out of your mind?
Right.
No, it's the opposite of that is true. You ruined your appetite for something better by something worse. And you can't serve two masters. You can't have it both ways. Eventually, a break is going to come. If you play games with Christ, eventually the day will come where you have to make a decision. And if you spend all your days dallying with these other things, it's no guarantee that you're going to choose Jesus when the chips are down. And this is kind of the whole point of this whole section here, when he's talking about keeping your eyes on heaven, laying up treasures in heaven, making sure that your eye is full of light and taking this seriously. It all comes down to, do you believe that Jesus is real or not? Do you believe that God is in heaven or don't you? Do you believe that the Bible is true or not? Did the resurrection really happen or not? And if you believe that, there's really only one way to act, and that is in accordance with the commandments that Christ gave us. That's why this whole idea that we're going to serve Christ and use him as a symbol but not actually follow his example is totally preposterous and a miserable way to be. Because the Lord has shown us that you try to do this both ways, you're going to end up picking the other one when the time comes. So that's why I would not be surprised if all these people that are saying we need Jesus, we need Christ in order to reclaim the West, and we keep on pushing back and saying, no, that's not what Christ is for. Eventually there will come a point for a lot of these people where they say, well, then forget Jesus. They're not going to say, well, then forget my culture. They're going to say, well, then who needs Jesus? I'm going to go somewhere else to get what I need. And some of them do, and some of them have.
Mention setting out to follow Christianity, but you only take the tough parts of it without any of the blessings. That's what they're doing. Yeah, well, I'll be monogamous, and I'll be disciplined, and I'll honor other people, and I'll do all these things, or at least I'll say I will, right? And I'll do all these things, but yet I won't get the Holy Spirit. I won't get the blessings of close fellowship with Jesus. I won't get the joy that comes from actually knowing Jesus and actually obeying him. I don't need all those things. I'll just take the tough bits. Of course they get frustrated. Of course they get mad. Of course they say, what's the point of this eventually? Because all you just grabbed all the hardest parts of Christianity, left all the joyful parts, and thought that was going to get you anything.
And they say things then like, I tried following Jesus.
Yeah.
I went in as deep as you could get. I was the most committed Christian, and there's nothing in it. And then you hear them describe it and say, well, I was a hateful, bigoted Jew hater on the internet and posted a lot of pictures of Marcus Aurelius. Like,
and had some legalistic rules for a couple months.
Did you go to church? No, but and it's like every Christian every believer you came across was trying to bring you into the fold, literally, to follow Jesus, and you wouldn't have anything to do with it. Don't you dare walk away and say, that's why I hate Jesus. Because you didn't actually come to Christ. You never did. You didn't even make a move. You were always in the world, always in darkness. So don't say, I saw the light, when you didn't actually see the light in the first place. And so many of these people that, I'm ex-evangelical because I tried Jesus and it didn't work. And what it really boils down to is, well, I had a gay friend and I just couldn't stand the thought that they were going to hell. Then what sort of believer were you? Where all it takes is one friend walking in sin that I refuse to share the gospel with, and I'd rather go along with them. And it's not good, man. Everything that Jesus has for you, the Bible says at the right hand of God is pleasure forevermore. It's a better way to serve Jesus. It's a better way to live. You'll enjoy your life better. And there might be struggles, but you also have the hope of the life to come, which is something you can't buy, friend. You cannot buy that hope that Jesus gives you. And it has to come back to, are you going to serve the Lord or aren't you? And I hope that you'll say with me, yeah, I really want to do this. And once you step out in that way, you will find that it's real. Stop bringing along your little philosophies, your ideas that you won't compromise. You've got to come with nothing. You've got to come naked before the Lord, like a little kid, and ready to be taught by the Lord Jesus, humbly, ready to die to yourself. And then when you start to walk in his ways, you'll see that, oh my goodness, he was right all along. Zach, anything to add here at the end?
You ready for one more C.S. Lewis quote?
I knew I shouldn't have opened up that box with you.
It was your fault. I always loved I think it's in Mere Christianity where he talks about, he said, we're far too easily pleased. He said, we're foolish people fooling around with, he says, money and food and sex. And we've been given these promises of unimaginable pleasure with Jesus. And instead we're hanging on to these things saying, no, but I'll have to let go of this. And he's like, you have no idea. He said, like, you're like a kid who won't stop playing, with mud in the street because you don't know what a trip to the beach is like. and you've been promised this incredible gift, but you won't let go of the thing that you have right in front of you, right? And of course, the beauty of it is you're the only person who can actually enjoy the life we have as a Christian, because you know how to do it, how to actually live the way the Lord wants you to live a real fulfilled life. So yeah, if there's anything that you ever feel like, oh, I don't want to let this go, I promise you, in Jesus, like the Scripture says, our pleasures forevermore. You have no idea how blessed the Lord wants to make you.
Go all in, baby. Just go all in and taste and see, and I promise you won't be disappointed. Thanks for listening to the Ironworks podcast, everybody. I'll remind you one more time about ironworks.media, the premier Christian resource network for Calvary Chapel. We've got books, podcasts, videos, conferences, and more. You can download, or shall I say, join our mailing list there to find out about upcoming things and download 2 free ebooks if you do that. I'll remind you also about the new book, The Desolation of Israel, that just came out. Visit ironworks.media, and please be sure to leave us an Amazon review if you enjoyed the book. We'll be talking to y'all soon. Next time we'll conclude chapter 6 in the Sermon on the Mount here on the Ironworks podcast.
Thanks, guys.